Hey guys, it's Alora, and today I'm here with my top 15 books of 2015. I was planning on doing a top 10 books of 2015 video, but I was trying to narrow down which books were my absolute favorites, and I was having a really hard time. Just to give you a little perspective, I read 87 books in 2015, so 15 is a very small percentage of 87. These books are not going to be in any particular order until we get to the top 3, because I was able to narrow down my absolute favorites of the year, but the rest of them are really good. There are definitely other books that I loved, but these are the best of the best in my opinion. To start us off, we have The Martian by Andy Weir. Now, I have been pressed to read this book ever since it came out. I was working in a bookstore and some of the other employees in the bookstore read this and said that it was amazing, said that it was hilarious, and I didn't believe them, but I read it and it's absolutely wonderful. This book is about Mark Watney, who is an astronaut who gets stranded on Mars all by himself, and he has to learn how to survive for multiple years until he can potentially be rescued. That does not sound like something that would be funny, but it is laugh out loud hilarious, I kid you not. This book is full of science, so it's incredibly fascinating, but the way that Andy Weir writes it is, I wouldn't say it's accessible, but it is understandable. He definitely describes what's happening so that you can understand what's going on. This book is by no means just straight up science. It is harrowing, it is humorous, and all around just a wonderful book. They did make this into a movie this year starring Matt Damon, who I really like as an actor. I will say that I enjoyed the movie, but I loved the book. So if you've watched the movie and you thought it was good, try the book. If you really love the movie, try the book. If you haven't watched the movie, just try the book. Anyone, try the book. Please, read the book. Read the book. It's so good. Next, I want to talk about a debut author of 2015, and that is Adam Silvera and his book, More Happy Than Not. I wasn't necessarily expecting to love this one either, but this book was fantastic. It deals with issues of race, with sexuality, with memory, with second chances, with class. It's really comprehensive. It has everything you could ever need in a book. Not really, but it's fantastic. I would definitely recommend it if any of those topics sound interesting to you. It's mostly a contemporary novel, but it also has a little bit of sci-fi. It's not overpowering at all. It's set in the very near future, so there's just a little more technology than we have today. But for the most part, it's a contemporary that deals with a lot of heavy issues, but the way that he writes it is fantastic. It twists and it turns, and you don't expect what is happening to happen, and it's full of interpersonal relationships, and I would just really recommend it. Obviously, it's on my list. The next book on my list is Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. For a little bit of change of pace here, we have a new adult romance. Before this year, I wasn't actually a fan of Colleen Hoover. I'd read Maybe Someday, and it just wasn't my cup of tea, but I decided to give another one of her books a shot because everybody raves about her. Not everybody, but lots of people. And so I decided to pick up Ugly Love because that was her newest one at the time when I picked it up at the beginning of the year. I went into this book expecting a cheesy new adult romance, but this book was actually incredibly emotional. Not only were the two main characters, Tate and Miles, fantastically written, but this book was almost like a mystery. You didn't know what was going on to create these two characters because you had these characters and they had some problems, but you weren't sure what happened in their past to make them that way, and throughout the book you're sort of trying to figure it out, and overall it was just very well done. I'd like to give an honorable mention to a couple other Colleen Hoover books that I read this year. I know this is a little bit cheating. These don't count towards my 15, people, but I also read her newest one, November 9, which I really enjoyed, and the one before that, which also came out this year, was Confess, and I liked that also. The next book that I read was actually an audiobook, so I listened to it, and it is The Opportunist by Taryn Fisher. Basic premise is that there's a young woman named Olivia, and she is still desperately in love with her ex-boyfriend, but they broke up with this horrible conflict. Something really bad happened, and you're not exactly sure what happened at the beginning of the book. And then she runs into him in a record store a few years after they've broken up, and he doesn't remember her. So it turns out that her boyfriend had amnesia because he got in this car crash, and he doesn't remember her at all, and so she decides to kind of exploit this situation and try to get back together with him, try to win his love again, and see if they can work it out a second time. This is a series of 3 books. They are romance books, but Tarryn Fisher always weaves in this awesome blend of romance and mystery, and so you're never exactly sure what's going on in her books. The plot is intriguing, the character dynamics are great. Overall, just A+. A+ work, Tarryn. I absolutely recommend this series and anything that she's written, pretty much. Next up, we have a YA fantasy called The Ember and the Ashes by Saba Tahir. I'm sure that many of you have read this book already or heard of it if you haven't read it yet. What I loved about this book is that the world building wasn't too heavy because it was inspired by ancient Rome. So a lot of people already have a fairly good knowledge base of what ancient Rome was like. And this book follows 2 main protagonists, both of whom I found interesting to read, from Laia and Elias. It also includes some pretty brutal trials a la the Hunger Games, so if you're interested in that, definitely check this book out. I did a full review on it earlier in the year, so I'll link that below if you're interested. The next book I have on my list is Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. Now this is the second time that I've read through it, so it's definitely a cheat because the first time that I read through it was in 2014, but I didn't really love it in 2014, and I decided to reread it this year, and I absolutely adored it. Reading it as a junior in college just helped me resonate with this book more and with Kath's character more. This book is about a freshman girl who is really just trying to define herself as a writer and as a person. So Rainbow Rowell's writing style is just so inviting. It makes you get lost in the book, sort of like a dream or a really good movie. She makes you love her characters, and it's because she makes them so relatable. So if any of you haven't checked out Rainbow Rowell, I would absolutely recommend doing so. She has some fantastic books. I also like Eleanor and Park. And the next book that I'm going to be talking about is the book that she came out with in 2015, which is Carry On. This book is based upon the fanfic that was in Fangirl, but it's written from Rainbow Rowell's, not her point of view, but it's written with her writing style, not Kath's from Fangirl. This book is it's sort of a parody of Harry Potter. It's written as if it were the 7th book in a series of this boy who goes off to a magic school. And it's a chosen one story, except he doesn't really feel like he should be the chosen one, the main character Simon. And it also includes some good LGBTQ themes, which is incredibly rare to find in fantasy and in YA for that matter, so definitely check it out if you're interested in that. Again, Rainbow Rowell's writing style is fantastic. Next on my list is Queen of Shadows, which is the 4th novel in the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. I definitely don't want to spoil you on anything that happens in the 4th book, but the 1st book is about Selena Sardathian, who is this assassin who has to compete in the King's Tournament in order to become his champion and essentially win her freedom. Now, I liked the premise of the 1st book. I enjoyed the first few books. They weren't my absolute favorite, but by this 4th book, the story has changed significantly and has developed quite a bit. I have mixed feelings on the way that this series started out different in the beginning and changes so much, but by this 4th book, Sarah J. Maas really blew me away. The book is incredibly complex. She just twines all of these different storylines together so well, and she's developing the story so well that I just had to love it and put it on this list. Next, I'd like to talk about Winter by Marissa Myers. I listened to this on audiobook, which is why I don't have the physical copy in my hands. This is another 4th book in a series, The Lunar Chronicles, which is sci-fi, slightly, retellings of popular fairy tales or well-known fairy tales. I am such a sucker for fairy tales, and the characters in this book series are just really snarky and fun. The first 2 books in this series were fairly simplistic, but by the 4th book, good old Marissa really outdid herself. It was great. It was a finale, by the way, and it was a wonderful wrap-up to this series. I feel like she wove all of her storylines and characters together so well, and the way she wrapped up this story was beautiful. The next book is also loosely based upon fairy tales or folklore, and that is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. This is based upon Slavic folklore of Baba Yaga, or at least it intertwines that plot into this story. Basically, our main character Agnieszka lives in a valley that is surrounded by an evil wood, and at the head of the wood lives a dragon, but he's not really a dragon. He's just a man, a wizard who calls himself the dragon, and he lives in a tower, and once every 10 years he takes a girl who has to come live in the tower with him for 10 years. Nobody knows exactly what he's doing with the girls, but Agnieszka gets chosen, so that's the little blurb that goes along with this one. The writing is really what sets this book apart. It's lyrical, it captivates you from the start, and it sort of pulls you along in these undulating waves of storyline, and it felt woven. You know how fairy tales sometimes feel woven, crafted? Hard to explain, but it's beautiful, so I would definitely recommend checking this out. Also, it's a standalone fantasy novel, which is a rose among lilies, or whatever the expression is. It's so rare, so I really appreciated that about this novel. The next book on my list is Big Magic: Creative Living Beyond Fear by Elizabeth Gilbert. This is the author of Eat, Pray, Love, if you weren't aware. A lot of people find her writing style pretentious, but I absolutely love it. I find it subtly amusing and really inspirational. The best part of this book is that Elizabeth Gilbert encourages everyone to find creative outlets, not just people who want to pursue a creative career. Next up, we have Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This book is about Wade Watts, who has to play this virtual reality video game called The Oasis in order to find something called the Egg, which will entitle him to basically this huge company that's worth billions of dollars. And the thing is that Wade is incredibly poor, as is the majority of the population. He has pretty much devoted his life to trying to find the egg. This book is very humorous. It includes a lot of 80s references, but I feel like you don't have to know them to find the book funny. I did not know a lot of the 80s references, but I still really enjoyed the book. The next book on my list is Mudvayne by Taryn Fisher. This is a book that I think is really better to go into blind. I will say that the main character wakes up in a cabin in the middle of a snowy wasteland with no memory of how she arrived and no way to leave. Also, she's not alone. So this book is about 3/4 mystery and 1/4 mystery romance drama. It's thrilling, it's intense, and there are a lot of themes presented in this book. I know the cover looks bad. It's not that kind of book at all. It's very well done. I would absolutely recommend reading it. It is my third favorite book of the year. My second favorite book of the year is I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. This book was spectacular. It follows two perspectives, these two twins. One's a girl, one's a boy. One of the perspectives is when they're 13 years old before this huge life-changing event happens to them, and then the other perspective follows the girl when they are both 16 after this huge life-changing event has happened to them. This book deals with art, with friendship, with family relationships, with loss and grief, and so many other really important, moving themes. The way that Jandy Nelson brings this story together is spectacular. She really did a fantastic job weaving the two perspectives and the two timelines together so that everything makes sense at the right time, and it was very moving. So if you're looking for a contemporary book that you'll love, I would absolutely recommend checking out I'll Give You the Sun. Just as a warning, you may cry a bit, but it's good crying. And drumroll please, the last book, my absolute favorite book of the year, is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. This book, I don't even know how to describe this book. It's so good. Hands down, it's my favorite book of the year. This is a short story. It's not very long. It has pictures in it, but it's not a graphic novel. It is a novel that is just interlaced with these gorgeous black and white drawings. Essentially, this book is about a young boy, I think maybe 8 years old, whose mother is dying from cancer. And the way that Patrick Ness writes about grief and loss in this book is so brutally honest and real and incredible. I was absolutely awestruck by the mastery of this book. I spent about 3/4 of the book crying and 1/4 of the book ugly bawling my eyes out because it's just so good. If you only read one book out of all of these books that I've just listed, let it be this one. Do yourself a favor. Allow yourself to just be caught up in the beauty that is this book. Okay guys, those were my top 15 plus a few maybe books of 2015. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you're interested in this video, be sure to check out some of my other videos. You can subscribe if you like the content that I'm posting. Here's to hoping that 2016 is a fantastic reading year for all of us. Okay, until next time, stay happy, stay healthy. Bye guys.